As saxophone players, we know that our instrument is incredibly versatile when it comes to tone color and expression. But you might not be taking full advantage of everything that's available to you on the horn. There are a lot of different alternate fingerings that we can use to accomplish different sonorities and pitch alterations for different notes. But we can also use alternate fingerings to facilitate smoother technique and better mechanics as we move through different passages on the horn. So today I just want to go through the entire range of the saxophone and show you everything I know about alternate fingerings and how they can be used. So I hope these fingerings are valuable to you in some way. I'm kind of selfishly hoping that the comments section of this video will be as valuable as the video itself. After all, there's a lot of fingerings out there. I don't know everything. So feel free to sound off in the comments if you've got a fingering that's really cool that you like to use. Let us know how you use it. So lastly, before we move ahead into the fingerings, I just want to say these fingerings should not be used as tricks or quick fixes for playing notes in tune or anything like that. Your voicing and your embouchure should always be the first line of defense for controlling things like the core of your sound, your tone, and pitch. So we're going to start at the bottom of the saxophone and just work our way up chromatically one note at a time. We're going to have to skip low B flat, B, C, and C sharp. Because when you're closing pretty much every key on the tube, there's just not a lot of room left over to alter the pitch or tone. If there are fingerings for those notes that y'all know about, please let me know in the comments. I don't think there are, but moving ahead. Low D. We have, of course, the standard fingering. So the main one that I use for low D is to open the side C sharp, left hand pinky C sharp key while I finger D. Let's hear what that does. It just kind of opens the sound up a little bit and raises the pitch ever so slightly, which I find useful on alto especially because sometimes that low D can be just a little bit flat. So that fingering's pretty useful. Another one that I use sometimes if you want kind of a more subdued, covered, darker sound for low D, you can finger low D and add your B key, left hand pinky B on the left hand. Not one that I use a whole lot, but you can hear there's a pretty drastic difference in tone color with that one. So I can use the same alterations on low E flat. I can use that same C sharp key to raise and open up the low E flat a little bit. Or again, the low B key with the E flat fingering. Moving on to low E. Now, if you use any of your left hand pinky keys, it's going to alter the timbre just ever so slightly. It's very subtle. Not a lot happening there, but those are options. So the right hand E flat key raises the pitch up pretty significantly on low E, and the right hand C pinky key lowers it. F. One that I like to use sometimes for F is finger the standard fingering and then add your low C pinky key and your B flat key. Just kind of a cool alteration in tone there. For F sharp, I use a similar one, low C key and low B key. So C and B with the F sharp standard fingering. Just kind of changes the tone from a ah to a ooh, ah ooh, ah ooh, ah ooh sound. And of course for F sharp, we also have the option to use the built-in alternate fingering, which is to finger F and then add the little side key here with your third finger. Very useful for chromatic passages sometimes, or trills. G. Now there's not a lot we can do with our left hand pinky keys for G because they're just going to give us a G sharp. That'll actually be useful in a moment, you'll see. And for the right hand pinky keys, they're not really going to alter the tone of the G very much. So for G, as far as I know, we're mostly stuck with what we've got. Two interesting trill fingerings though for G. If you want to trill between a G and a D, which with standard fingerings is usually pretty awkward, what you can do is finger the G and then slur to your side E key over here. So G, like that. It's a little bumpy, and to get the D, the top D in tune, you have to voice it correctly. But it's a lot smoother than the standard fingering, as I showed you. Another cool trill fingering for the G is finger the G, and then if you have an F sharp key, which most modern saxophones do, not vintage ones, but G to E flat. Again, slightly bumpy and not perfectly in tune, but a lot smoother than going. So those are sometimes pretty useful. G sharp. So with G sharp, we're pretty much in the same situation as we were with the G. These right hand pinky keys are not going to do much. We can use the same trill fingerings as we did with G if you want to trill to a D or an E flat. Those can be useful. But one really useful fingering for G sharp is if you play it by fingering a G, and then instead of the standard G sharp key, use your C sharp, side pinky C sharp. This is really useful if you're playing in the key of D flat or C sharp, and you have something like an arpeggio. Instead of trying to jump back and forth between G sharp and C sharp like that. It's just a lot more fluid, a lot easier mechanically speaking. A. Now if you open any of your left hand pinky keys with A, it's going to raise the pitch ever so slightly. Not something that I find a whole lot of need for, but if you need it, those are there. Now if you close any of the keys on the right hand, your primary keys, any of these three, it's going to lower the pitch ever so slightly on the A. So those are there if you need them. A fingering I use pretty often with the A is to close all three of my main right hand keys while I play the A. If I want to do like a Michael Brecker-ish warbling kind of thing. Or if I'm playing a Maceo Parker kind of funk solo and I want the tone to change as I articulate. So now we come to middle register B flat. And we've finally arrived at a note that can be played as an overtone. Most of you probably know what overtones are. If you don't, it's kind of a topic for a whole other video, but I'll very briefly explain. If I finger a low B flat and use my voicing technique to change the direction of the airstream, I can produce a note that's one octave above the low B flat. So finger low B flat, but using voicing, produce the middle B flat. And overtones are great because they give us that really full, rich, thick, resonant sound that you can only get by playing a note as an overtone on top of a fundamental. So from here on out, B flat and above, we can use overtone fingerings to produce notes. We can't do that for A or any note below that. There are several other options for B flat that we can use. We have, of course, the side fingering, A with the side key. Now this one I play most often, probably because I learned it first in school. But after trial and error, I think that it does work best for me for scalar passages. I just think it's smoother, and I don't like having to take my hand off of its primary position to go to bis if I don't have to. Some of you might not mind that. So that brings us to the bis fingering, which is B, but with the little key underneath it as well. So you hit those two together. That's called bis. Now, bis is sometimes taught as the first B flat fingering instead of side, which I think is fine, and if that's how you do it, no problem. There are definitely occasions where bis has the advantage. Say if I'm doing a really rapid arpeggio in the key of E flat. Well, there, obviously, bis takes the cake. It has the advantage. It's all about context with the B flats. Like say I want to trill from an A to a B flat. Obviously side works better. But what if I want to trill from a G to a B flat? Obviously bis works better. So the other options that you have for B flat are the 1-in-1 fingering, there and there. I don't use that one much. It tends to be more of a flute fingering, the 1-in-1, but obviously it has its uses like trilling from B to B flat. An alternate fingering for B flat that I really like is to finger the bis and then add 1, 2, 3, and right hand pinky key, top pinky key. Similar to what I was doing with the A before. That's a really nice sound. It just kind of opens the B flat up a little bit, makes it a little punchier. So that's B flat. B. For B, we have, of course, the overtone fingering. So finger a low register B, and with the voicing, produce 1 octave above, just like we talked about with B flat. Now B sometimes comes out a little bit flat, sometimes really flat, depending on the horn. So you have this option to finger a standard B and then add your B flat key right here. That one's quite useful sometimes. You have a kind of a strange one, but a little bit interesting. If you finger a G and then the middle side key right here, not E key, not B flat. Kind of a stuffy sound, but also kind of fuzzy and interesting. So once again, that was G with the middle side key. One useful trill fingering for B is to finger the standard B and then use your E key to trill to a D sharp. Works pretty well. Moving on to C. So with C, we have several different options. We have the standard C, we have side C, which is produced by fingering a B, and then using that middle key again there. Kind of a different tone and pitch, but obviously most useful for trills. B to the side key. So that's side C. We also have the option to play the overtone, low C, producing 1 octave above with the voicing. Here's a really interesting one for middle C. I'm pretty sure I learned this from Jerry Bergonzi years ago in a master class. He was talking about fingerings he gleaned from Sonny Rollins, I believe. But this one's cool, check it out. So you basically finger a low B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then subtract that finger. So you get I love that fingering. It really opens the sound up but thickens it at the same time. It's a really interesting tone color. Try that one. Alright, so C sharp. Open C sharp. The overtone fingering, of course. Finger low C sharp. Get that nice thick sound. Another option is to play your octave key and your third finger on the left hand together. So those two. It's just a little bit brighter and a little bit sharper than the standard C sharp fingering, if you need that. Now we arrive at middle register D with the octave key. Now before, on the low D, I showed you how to use the C sharp key to raise the pitch up a little bit. We probably don't want to do that with our middle register octave key D, because most likely on almost every saxophone that note's already pretty sharp to begin with, so we don't want to make it any sharper. But there are other fingerings we can use for D. One really cool fingering for D is the palm D. Just the one side key, palm key right there, that's all you need. That fingering was used a lot by players like Cannonball Adderley, Phil Woods, mostly in scalar or moving passages. It's not a D that you really want to hold on to for very long. It tends to be kind of flat, depending on the horn. But like Cannonball's solo on Wabash, he uses it several times in that one. Kind of pops a little bit. Speaking of popping, another great D is to finger your standard D and add that key. Just kind of opens up the sound on that D, gives it an edge, makes it pop. I really like that one. And lastly for D, we talked about this before with the trill key, but I can finger G and add my E key there, the top side key, to get a really interesting sounding D. E flat. If I play my standard E flat fingering and add my low B flat key, the left hand pinky, it kind of darkens it up a bit and lowers the pitch just slightly. That sound again. Another option for E flat is to finger a third ledger line E, a high E, so these two palm keys, your E key without the octave key, no octave key, and play E flat that way. You can hear that gives you a very different sonority with that fingering. For E flat, you can also open your E flat palm key while you do the standard fingering. This is just like we did with the D before, only now instead of the D palm key, we open the E flat. It has a similar effect. Can really make it pop. And as we talked about before with the G trills, we can get a really interesting sounding E flat by fingering G and adding the high F sharp key to it. Pretty unique. Now we're at fourth space treble clef E. Now on this particular alto, and probably lots of others, this E tends to come out kind of on the sharp side. So sometimes I'll use that B flat key, low B flat pinky key, to lower it just a bit. Doesn't really change the tone much, but just gives it that slight decrease of pitch. Another interesting option for E is to finger an F, a high F that is, so 1, 2, 3 palm keys, with the E key over there, and no octave key. Again, a very unique sound for that note. And if we want to give this E just a little bit of extra zing, make it pop like we did with the D and E flat before it, we can finger the standard E and then open up our F palm key there, this one. Pops really nicely. So before we move on to F, I just want to make note of the fact that for D, E flat, and E in this middle register, we can use the overtone fingerings for those, which just involve playing them without the octave key. But they don't really offer much in the way of altering the tone or the pitch like the other overtone fingerings do. I'm not really sure why that is, but you can hear. So for some reason, those three are just different from the others that surround it. They don't give you that extra resonance that you get on other notes, like with a C. F. So with F, we can of course play it as an overtone, which means we finger low B flat, and with our voicing, produce the F. Which gives us that really thick, rich, full sound. Now, if you want to make it a little bit easier to do something like a warble, to go back and forth, or to do a false fingering kind of thing, you can take out the second finger here. You can subtract the middle finger on the right hand, and you get. You can also take out the third finger as well, and just do F with the C key and the low B flat key. So those are a couple of really nice options for F. So just as I did with E flat and E, I can also get that really unique tone color on F by playing a high F sharp. So I play a third ledger line F sharp with no octave key. So that's 1, 2, 3 palm keys, E key, the high F sharp key, and no octave key. Again, just a very unique and different kind of sonority for you to use. There's one other fingering for F that I almost forgot to tell you about. I had to come back and punch it in after the fact because it's a good one. It's pretty similar to the others that I showed you. It's basically just you finger the low B flat, so it's like we're playing an overtone, minus your third finger right hand. So finger low B flat, with or without the octave key, and let go of your third finger right hand. And it sounds like this. F sharp. I can play F sharp as an overtone, which means fingering a low B and producing the higher F sharp with my voicing. Another similar option is if I want to do the alternating false fingering warbling kind of effect that we did on some of the other notes. I can do standard F sharp and add low B, third finger, and a C key. So basically everything but this finger. So that's an option. For a more covered and slightly darker sounding F sharp, I can do the standard fingering and just add C and B, pinky keys, low C and low B. Just gives us that ah to ooh kind of thing that we've heard before. Ah, ooh, ooh. G. I could play it as an overtone, so finger low C and produce the G with my voicing. Now, if I do the same thing, finger the low C, but subtract this one finger, I get something that's really nice for doing the warble or the alternating false fingering kind of thing. That's a really nice option. G sharp. We can do an overtone, so finger low C sharp, and produce G sharp with your voicing. Nice and thick like all the others. Another option for G sharp, which will give you a slightly different sound, is to finger an A and then add 1, 3, and then the E flat pinky key. No octave. So A, So as we discussed on the low A, you can use any one of these three right hand keys to lower the pitch just slightly on A. If you want to use them for a glissando or a bend, it can be useful for that. So there's that. Or if you want to do the false fingering, warbling thing once again, using all three is a good option. And of course, before I forget, we can also play A as an overtone. So finger low D and produce the A with your voicing. B flat. So with B flat, we have pretty much the same options we did in the lower register on the middle B flat. We have side, bis, 1 and 1. But we have two options to play B flat as an overtone. We can finger low B flat and produce 2 octaves above. Or we can also finger a low E flat and produce the same note. So both those options are available to you. We have the bis fingering with the right hand warble, like we talked about before on the middle register one. High B. Once again, we have mostly the same options as we did with the low. We can raise the pitch slightly by using the B flat key. And then we have 2 options to play high B as an overtone. We can finger low B and produce it, or E. I personally think it's better to use the lowest fingering possible to get the overtone. It just gives it a richer sound, but it's all there for you. Upper register C. So once again, we have pretty much the same options with this one as we did with the lower C, or the middle C, excuse me. We have side C. For trills, we have the Jerry Bergonzi / Sonny Rollins fingering that I showed you earlier on the middle C. So that's fingering a low B without this key, this time with the octave. We have 2 options to play it as an overtone, fingering low C and producing the high C, or F. For the warble, or the false fingering fluctuation thing we've been doing, I can use that same little flipper that I was doing on the A earlier. So finger standard high C, and then all 4 of those together. And if you want to give it just a little bit of extra zing, you can add the low C key to it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I got to hit both of those together to get this. So you're kind of in the middle of the roller. All of that. It really is a flipper. It doesn't give you quite as much variation as on some of the other notes, like when we did it on A or B flat, but you might be better off just using the overtone to get the warble, the fluctuating false fingering thing. That's with the full overtone, the low C. High C sharp. So we have 2 options for overtones. We can finger a low C sharp and produce the upper C sharp. Or we can also finger a low F sharp and produce the same note. A little bit more difficult, takes more work with the voicing, but it can be done. And to bring the pitch down on that high C sharp, after all it tends to be a pretty sharp note, we can use those 3 main fingers on the right hand once again. Just lowers it a few cents, but it can bring it right in tune if you use it right. So now we're at palm key D. We have 2 options for playing this as an overtone. We can finger low B flat and use our voicing to really get it up there to the high D. Or we could also play it from a low G. So there's that. A couple of other interesting options for high palm key D. If we want to do the warbling thing, we can play the standard high D and then add 3 and 3 all at once. So those 6 with the high palm D. If you want to just do the left hand, you get something similar, but it's going to be kind of sharp, almost an E flat. But there's some options for that, for the false fingering kind of thing. High E flat, palm key E flat, or D sharp. Once again, a couple of different options for overtones. We can finger low B, and then with voicing, produce the high E flat. Or we could also play it from low G sharp. Another option for high E flat that gives you kind of a different sonority is to finger a front E. So 1, 2, front key, or the fourth key, octave key, and then add F sharp. So basically front E and that key. Just a little bit darker, a little bit thicker sounding than the standard. It's not a whole lot of difference. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's there. High E. So obviously we have the standard fingering, which is the 2 palm keys, and then your high E key over here with the octave, which is normally taught first, but many of you out there probably know the front fingering for high E. This is one that I actually prefer over the other. I just feel it has slightly better tone and pitch. So in case you don't know the front fingering, it's just 2 and 3 with your fork or front key right there. Same one we're going to use for front F. So that's front E. There's another fingering for high E that's a little bit more obscure, that you might not know, but it's really cool. I believe I learned this one from the great alto sax player Clark Gibson. I think he showed this to me quite a few years ago, so I'll give him credit for that. I don't know where he got it from, but I like it. It's really cool. So I finger a G sharp, and then I add my side E key right there to it. G sharp plus that. You can use the octave key or not. Check it out. I don't know if it's coming through on the mic, but it really opens that E up, gives it a nice sound. So mess around with that one at your leisure. And then once again, of course, we have the option to play high E as an overtone by fingering low C. Or we could play it as an overtone from A. Kind of difficult to do and a little unstable, but it's there. And if we want to get the false fingering or warbling effect on high E, once again, we can use those 3. High F. So the standard fingering for high F is of course 1, 2, 3 palm keys, octave key, and your side E key. But much like the E before it, I actually prefer the front fingering, or the fork fingering for high F. So I just play a C with the octave key and add my front key. So that's front F. I just think it rings out nicely. It's got a little bit more of a better pitch to it and better tone than the standard F fingering. So I try to use the front fingerings for E and F wherever possible. Although just like we talked about with the B flats, it's all about context. There may be some occasions where the standard palm key fingerings for E and F are better, and others where you like the front fingerings better. So just evaluate the context and use your best judgment. I will say that especially for arpeggios, the front F fingering for me definitely takes the cake. And once again, we have the option to play high F as an overtone from low B flat. And I know I said this is not an overtone lesson, but I just can't help myself. Once you get up into the D, E flat, E, F kind of register, those high notes, and you're producing overtones, try your best not to bite or pinch here. You want to accomplish those by moving your tongue position and using your voicing for that. And once again, for the warble or false fingering kind of thing, we can use our flipper over here. I'm using all 4 of those, or I can add the C key and do all 5 of those together. Gives me a little bit more of a drastic change in tone quality if I do that. So let me just mention before I forget, if you're playing the standard fingerings for notes like high E or F, and they're still coming out sharp, well, you know, first you need to address that here and here. But after that, like say you have to play a really soft E or high F and it's still coming out sharp, what you can do is drop palm key fingerings. So let's say I'm playing a high F, kind of soft. What I can do is let go of those 2 palm keys. It'll bring the pitch down just a little bit. Or for high E, I could just drop this key and not use that on my high standard E fingering. Alright, so we've come pretty much to the end of the line here. Usually high F is considered the top of the standard saxophone range. After that, we have altissimo. Although some of you on the more modern horns will probably have the F sharp key. A lot of vintage horns will not have it, but if you have that, all you have to do is add that to your high F fingering, and you've got F sharp. If you don't have that F sharp key, I'm going to show you a couple other ways that you can get a high F sharp. One way is I can finger the front F and add my B flat key. That'll give you an F sharp. Sounds pretty good. Another option for high F sharp is front F with first finger right hand. That one tends to be a little bit more in tune, just slightly flatter than the other one I showed you. And sometimes people like to add third finger left hand to that one. So you do front E with first finger right hand. So there you go, several different options for a high F sharp. And then of course we can't forget, if we finger a low B, we can produce high F sharp as an overtone. So there you go. That's what I know about alternate or false fingerings. It's kind of weird to call them false fingerings since they're not really false, they're just different ways of playing notes. But call them what you will. They have a lot of different uses and purposes, whether we're trying to create a different kind of tone color or produce an effect. Or if we're using it to alter a pitch, to get more in tune. Or if we're using it to facilitate smoother technique, like we do on the alternate G sharp with the C sharp. There's a lot of things we can do with alternate fingerings to enrich our playing. So have fun with those. Thank you so much for watching. I hope some of this is useful to you in some way. Once again, if you got a cool fingering that you like, feel free to post it in the comments and let us know how you use it. And if you could, please do all that really cool, typical YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe, share. Really does help me out. I'm planning to release another video on altissimo fingerings, so stay tuned for that. I'll see you on the next one.